The night air carried a chill that seemed to seep through my jacket as I stood on Eleanor Blackwood's porch, hesitating before the weathered oak door. I was only here because my boss had insisted, just get the signature on the insurance forms and leave, he'd said. Widows are always emotional messes. But something about the way she opened the door, her eyes reflecting both vulnerability and a strange, fierce determination, told me I was about to discover how wrong those assumptions could be. By morning, my entire life would change course, and hers would never be the same either. If you've ever misjudged someone based on a single aspect of their identity, this story might just change how you see the world around you. If you're enjoying this story so far, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more emotional journeys that challenge our perceptions. I shifted uncomfortably on Eleanor's doorstep, clutching my leather portfolio like a shield. The porch light cast harsh shadows across her face, accentuating the hollows beneath her cheekbones. At 42, Eleanor Blackwood had the kind of beauty that spoke of resilience rather than perfection, laugh lines around eyes that had seen too much sorrow lately, silver threads weaving through her dark hair. "Mr. Collins?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd expected. "From Meridian Insurance?" "Yes, ma'am. I apologize for the late hour. I can come back tomorrow if—" "No," she interrupted, opening the door wider. "Please come in. I've been waiting for these papers." Her home was modest but immaculate, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd imagined a recent widow might live in. 3 months had passed since Thomas Blackwood's fatal heart attack, yet there were no visible shrines to his memory, no scattered tissues or unwashed dishes. Just a home that felt, paused, as if holding its breath. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, leading me to a small dining table where a single-place setting remained from her dinner. "I shouldn't stay long," I replied automatically. "I just need your signature on these final claim documents, and then the life insurance payment can be processed." Eleanor nodded, taking the seat across from me. As I spread the documents before her, explaining each one with practiced efficiency, I noticed her attention drifting to the window, where rain had begun to tap against the glass. "Do you do this often, Mr. Collins?" she asked suddenly. "Insurance claims? It's my job." "No," she said, her eyes finding mine. "Visit widows at night, explaining how to monetize their husband's death." The bluntness of her question caught me off guard. I'm sorry if the timing is insensitive. My supervisor insisted these needed processing tonight." Eleanor's lips curved into something not quite a smile. "Your supervisor? Does he think all widows are the same? Fragile creatures waiting for a man to explain finances to them?" Heat crept up my neck. "I didn't mean to imply." "You think I'm just a widow," she whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of the papers without signing them. "That's all I am now? A category? A checkbox on your forms?" The question hung between us, heavier than it should have been. I'd processed dozens of death claims in my 5 years at Meridian, but something about Eleanor's directness made me feel like I was the one being evaluated. "I don't think that," I said finally, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Until this moment, she had been just another claim number. Eleanor stood abruptly, moving to a cabinet in the corner. She returned with 2 glasses and a bottle of amber liquid. "I'm having a drink. Join me or don't, but I'm not signing anything until I feel like a person to you, not a category." I should have politely declined. I should have reminded her about company policy and professional boundaries. Instead, I watched her pour 2 fingers of whiskey into each glass, and I accepted one when offered. "To categories," she said, raising her glass with a hint of challenge in her eyes. The whiskey burned pleasantly as I took a small sip. "Mrs. Blackwood." "Eleanor," she corrected. "If you're drinking my husband's favorite scotch in my dining room at 9 o'clock at night, you can use my first name." "Eleanor," I conceded. "I apologize if I've been insensitive." She studied me over the rim of her glass. "Do you know what the worst part is, Mr. Collins? Not the grief. Not even the loneliness. It's how everyone suddenly treats you like you're made of glass, or worse, like you're somehow less than you were before. As if my identity was solely tied to being Thomas's wife. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that filled the silence between us. I found myself noticing details about her I'd missed at first, the paint beneath her fingernails, the sketchbook half hidden under a magazine on the coffee table, the way she held herself with a dancer's posture despite her evident exhaustion. "What did you do?" I asked, surprising myself with my interest. A genuine smile touched her lips for the first time. I am, an art teacher. High school. Currently on leave, but I'm going back next semester. That explains the paint, I said, gesturing to her hands. She glanced down as if noticing the smudges for the first time. "I was working when you knocked. It helps process things." "May I see?" The question slipped out before I could consider its propriety. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded, leading me to a small room off the living area that had been converted into a studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, some finished, others in progress. But it was the large painting on the easel that commanded attention, a storm-tossed sea beneath a sky torn between darkness and light, with a single boat navigating the turbulent waters. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Powerful." "It's unfinished," she replied, standing close enough that I could smell the faint scent of turpentine and something floral, lavender, perhaps. "Like me." Our eyes met, and something shifted in the air between us, an acknowledgement that we were no longer insurance agent and claimant, but two people standing in a room filled with raw emotion made visible through art. "I should go," I said, though I made no move toward the door. "It's getting late." Eleanor's hand touched my arm lightly. "Don't leave me tonight," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Not yet. It's been 3 months since anyone has looked at me and seen more than grief." I knew I should leave. The forms remained unsigned on her dining table. My car waited in her driveway. My empty apartment across town held nothing but leftover takeout and a television that served mainly as background noise to keep the silence at bay since my divorce 2 years ago. "I can stay a little longer," I found myself saying. We returned to the dining room, but the formal distance between insurance agent and claimant had dissolved. As Eleanor refilled our glasses, she began to tell me about Thomas, not the sanitized version people share at funerals, but the complex reality of a 20-year marriage to a good but flawed man. "He snored terribly," she said with a sad smile. "And he could never remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste. But he brought me coffee every morning for 20 years, even when we were fighting." As the night deepened, so did our conversation. I found myself sharing things I rarely discussed, my failed marriage, my abandoned dreams of becoming a writer, the growing emptiness of processing other people's tragedies without ever addressing my own. "Why do you stay at a job that makes you so unhappy?" Eleanor asked, her eyes reflecting genuine curiosity rather than judgment. I stared into my glass, watching the light play through the amber liquid. "Security. Routine. Fear of starting over at 37. Fear is a poor architect for a life," she said softly. The clock on her wall showed it was well past midnight when I finally remembered the forms. "We should probably." Eleanor nodded, returning to the table and picking up the pen I'd offered hours earlier. But before signing, she looked up at me. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the widow. Not the claim. Me." As she signed the documents, I realized with startling clarity that I didn't want this night to end, not because of any romantic notion, but because for the first time in years, I felt present, engaged with another human being in a way that transcended the transactional relationships that had come to define my existence. When she handed the signed papers back, our fingers brushed, and I felt an electric current of possibility. "I should go," I said again, this time gathering my portfolio. Eleanor walked me to the door, where the rain had finally stopped, leaving the night air clean and heavy with the scent of wet earth. "What happens now?" she asked. The claim will be processed. You should receive the payment within 2 weeks. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. I meant with us, Daniel. The question caught me off guard. I don't know. There are professional boundaries. Which we've thoroughly crossed already, she pointed out. But I understand if you need to retreat back behind them. I stood on her porch, portfolio in hand, poised between the safe, predictable path back to my car and something entirely unknown. I could come back, I heard myself say. Not as your insurance agent. I'd like that, she replied. I have an exhibition next Friday. Small gallery downtown. You could see if I finished the storm painting. As I drove home through the quiet streets, the signed claim form secure in my portfolio, I realized that what had begun as a routine business call had somehow become a turning point. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't just a widow, just as I wasn't just an insurance agent. We were both people suspended between what we had been and what we might become, navigating our own storm-tossed seas. The next morning, I placed her claim on my supervisor's desk with the others, but I couldn't stop thinking about her studio, her paintings, the way she had challenged me to see beyond categories. During my lunch break, I did something I'd never done before. I researched the gallery where her exhibition would be held and marked the date in my calendar. The following week passed in a blur of routine tasks that suddenly seemed more hollow than before. I processed claims, attended meetings, and fielded calls, but my mind kept returning to Eleanor's question, why do you stay at a job that makes you so unhappy? By Friday evening, I found myself standing outside the small gallery, watching through the window as Eleanor moved among the guests, her dark hair swept up elegantly, wearing a deep blue dress that made her look like she had stepped out of one of her own paintings. I almost lost my nerve, but then she looked up and saw me through the glass. The smile that transformed her face gave me the courage to open the door. The gallery was crowded with art enthusiasts and what I assumed were Eleanor's colleagues and students. Her work dominated the main wall, landscapes and seascapes that captured both the physical world and some deeper emotional current beneath the surface. The storm painting I had seen in progress now hung in the center, completed. The boat I had noticed was still there, but now it had reached calmer waters, though the storm clouds lingered on the horizon. You came, Eleanor said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne. I said I would. I accepted the glass, suddenly aware of how out of place I felt in my work suit among the bohemian crowd. And insurance agents always keep their word? There was that mischievous glint again. This one does, I replied, finding it easier than expected to match her light tone. She led me through the exhibition, introducing me simply as Daniel to those who asked, offering no explanation for my presence that might categorize me. As the evening progressed, I watched her in her element, passionate about art, engaged with her community, fully alive in a way that defied the widow label I had so thoughtlessly applied. Near the end of the night, as the crowd thinned, we stood before the storm painting. You finished it, I observed. Eleanor nodded. It's called Passage. The boat made it through. It did. She turned to face me. Though the journey isn't over. Is it ever? Her smile was answer enough. We left the gallery together, walking through streets still damp from an earlier shower. The city lights reflected in puddles like scattered stars. Are you hungry? She asked. There's a little place around the corner that stays open late. Over plates of pasta in a tiny Italian restaurant, we continued the conversation that had begun in her dining room a week earlier. This time, there were no insurance forms between us, no professional roles to navigate. Just 2 people discovering unexpected connection. I gave my notice today, I said as we shared a tiramisu. Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. At Meridian? Why? I considered the question, searching for the right words. Because you were right. Fear is a poor architect for a life. I've spent 5 years processing other people's worst moments without building anything meaningful of my own. What will you do instead? I'm not entirely sure yet, I admitted. I have some savings. Enough to take some time to figure it out. Maybe try writing again. She reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching mine. That takes courage. Or foolishness, I said with a self-deprecating smile. Sometimes they're the same thing. Her eyes held mine. The night you came to my house, I had been sitting alone for hours, staring at that unfinished painting, wondering if I would ever feel like myself again. If I would ever be more than Thomas's widow. And now? Now I'm beginning to remember that I was Eleanor before I was Mrs. Blackwood. I'll always love Thomas, always miss him. But his ending doesn't have to be mine. As we walked back to where my car was parked near the gallery, the night air had turned cool again. Eleanor shivered slightly, and without thinking, I slipped my jacket around her shoulders. Such a gentleman, she teased, but pulled the jacket closer. Force of habit, I replied. My mother raised me right. When we reached my car, an awkward moment stretched between us, that universal hesitation at the end of an evening when neither person is quite sure what comes next. Thank you for coming tonight, Eleanor said finally. It meant a lot. Thank you for inviting me. Your work is extraordinary. She smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. So what happens now, Daniel Collins? The echo of her question from a week ago hung between us, but this time I had an answer ready. Now, I said, taking a small step closer, we stop letting other people's categories define us. We write our own stories. I'd like that, she whispered, her face tilted up toward mine. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a beginning rather than a culmination. When we parted, I saw in her eyes the same mixture of hope and uncertainty that I felt. I should go, she said, slipping my jacket from her shoulders and handing it back. Can I see you tomorrow? I asked. Her smile was answer enough. In the months that followed, Eleanor and I built something neither of us had expected to find. Not a replacement for what we had lost, but something entirely new. She returned to teaching, bringing renewed passion to her classroom. I began freelance writing, starting with local arts coverage that allowed me to merge my business background with my creative aspirations. We moved slowly, respectful of the shadows that still sometimes fell across her heart when memories of Thomas surfaced. There were difficult moments, the first time I stayed overnight in what had been their bedroom, the awkward holiday gatherings with her family who weren't quite sure how to categorize me, the occasional well-meaning friend who referred to our relationship as her moving on. I'm not moving on, she corrected one such friend over dinner. I'm moving forward. There's a difference. A year after that first night on her porch, we stood together in her studio, now our studio, as I had taken to writing there while she painted. The storm painting hung on the wall, a reminder of where we had begun. I've been commissioned to do a series, she said, showing me sketches for new works. The gallery owner wants to call it Widow's Walk. I raised an eyebrow. How do you feel about that? Eleanor considered the question, her paint-stained fingers tracing the outlines of her sketches. A year ago, I would have hated it. Now, it's just one part of who I am. Not the whole story. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder to look at the sketches. It's going to be beautiful. She turned in my embrace, her hands coming to rest on my chest. You know what I've learned, Daniel? We're all more than our labels. More than widow, divorce, insurance agent, artist. Those are just the shorthand others use because the full truth of a person is too complex to capture in a single word. That sounds like something a writer would say, I teased. I must be rubbing off on you.